We'll begin our panel discussion. I'll start by posing some questions of my own to the panelists, and then we'll turn to questions from the audience. We also want to hear from those of us who are joining us online. And those of you who are online, you may submit your question through the Berkeley Engineering Twitter feed using the hashtag #GTL2012, or you can use our Facebook page and go to the Global Technology Leaders Conference event to leave a comment. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So first, I'd like to welcome back to the stage our keynote speakers, Bernard Amadei and Carl Bass. It's also my pleasure to introduce two additional panelists. First, I'm delighted to welcome Ana Claudia Arias as a panelist. She joined the Berkeley Engineering faculty in 2011. She's an associate professor in our Electrical Engineering and Computer Sciences department. She's rapidly emerging as a pioneer in the area of flexible electronics. She uses printing techniques to fabricate flexible, large area electronic devices and sensors. Someday, we may be seeing clothing or surgical dressings with special sensing properties based on her research. Originally from Brazil, she earned her PhD in physics from Cambridge in 2001. She has worked in industry as a research scientist and as the manager of Xerox PARC's printed electronic devices. At Plastic Logic in Cambridge, she led the semiconductor group. Her research focuses on the use of electronic materials processed from solution in flexible electronic systems. So next, I would like to introduce Dale Doherty. Dale is the founding editor and publisher of Make magazine. I hope everybody in the audience has read the Make magazine. If not, I recommend it. The co-creator of the Maker Faire, and I hope you've all been to a Maker Faire, and is the co-founder of O'Reilly Media. He's been honored by the White House as a champion of change and innovator who's helping fellow citizens meet the challenges of the 21st century. This recognition came as part of Washington's efforts to convene people from around the country to discuss American manufacturing and jobs. Earlier, Dale was the developer of Global Network Navigator, the first commercial website launched in 1993 and sold to America Online in 1995. He was also developer and publisher of Web Review, the online magazine for web designers, and developed the Hacks series of books. Thank you, Bernard, Ana Claudia, Carl, and Dale for joining us. And shall we begin? Let me start by giving a little bit of airtime to the two you've not heard from. Let me get started with you, Dale. Tell us a little bit about why you believe the Maker movement is really going to change the nature of innovation and manufacturing.
Well, I think the Maker movement is an invitation to participate and to do things, that it really can connect all of us in what we're able to do. And I almost think some of what we're doing is inviting amateurs and recognizing the role of amateurs in this. And if making is a participatory sport, like any sport, it really is built on a foundation of amateurs, people who play because they love to do it. And they play even though they might have other careers. They play because they enjoy getting together with other people who do this. So I think part of what we did with Make was kind of reconnect to, I think, is a tradition, and you find it in most cultures, of tinkering, of making things. And as Carl pointed out, we live in a generation where we're getting new tools, and software is making a fundamental change in our lives. But in some ways, making is an invitation to hack the physical world, to hack things not just that occur on a computer screen, but occur around us.
But you know, I mean, when Make was first introduced to me, a guy who we know, whose identity I'll spare for so that told me, the Make magazine is like Popular Mechanics on steroids. But I think it's more. I really think it's more. I agree with your characterization. But if you listen to Carl, it was more than an invitation. It's a deadly serious making in quantity. So can you comment a little bit about, apart from the invitation,
right?
How do you see it?
Well, I think there's two things that I see as part of our mission. One is I want to help people get started. Mm-hmm. So that first of all, there's part of the invitation is, hey, like a hobby, there's a front door to go through, and it's not too difficult. There's some way. There's a kit, or there's a book, or there's a person that says, come on, you can do this. And and that applies in our space not just to one thing, like you can do something on a 3D printer, but you can do something on a CNC machine or on and on. But then there's another dimension, which is how do you get better at it? And largely that's in a community of meeting other people, seeing a lot of different work from it, and learning how to do that. So it is hard. I think that's one thing I've been kind of just jogging my head. Using technology has become a lot easier, but making it is harder than using it. But it's gotten easier to make things. And I think that the goal I kind of referenced in my head is like an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid that has a problem that fits the world of software. Today can kind of spend an immense amount of time and create a website or create an app that helps to shape that problem. And if that problem is solved by a gadget or a physical device, it's not as easy as that piece of software. It's a little bit harder. The obstacles are fewer than they were years ago, but there's still another set of things, like how do I manufacture this in quantity? But in a sense, they can start with being able to manufacture one of those things and get that idea to be real and something they can share with other people.
So I'm going to come back to this because I have a little more to ask you, but let me, in the interest of getting everybody else in. Ana Claudia, can you tell us what your inspiration for flexible electronics is, and how did you acquire sort of the technical expertise to realize your innovations there?
Sure. Being in this panel is really good because I grew up in Brazil, and I connected a lot with what Bernard was saying, that there are several people around me growing up that really had to go home and do their homeworks with a candle next to them. So when I started studying physics and devices, it was in this area of a new set of materials, plastics, that had a new functionality. They were conductors or semiconductors. And with them, people started, only in 1995, people started to make light-emitting diodes. I wanted to make solar cells to bring energy. So I went to do a PhD in the University of Cambridge with the idea that I could save the world, or at least the part of the world that I came from, by making solar panels and providing solar energy in large area in much lower cost, because it was clear to me that unless the cost was low, it would be very difficult for people to have it in their houses. So off I went to Cambridge to do my PhD, and I worked on solar cells many years ago when people really didn't care about solar cells, unfortunately. Now we see that people do care a little bit more. And I continue my education and my work towards this technology, where you can use new materials that are really designed and synthesized for the functionality that you need from them. So they can absorb the right wavelength of light, but they can also be synthesized to emit the right wavelength of light. They can be used as sensors, and they can be processed with technologies that are close to our lives, such as printing. So if you think about the ways my group designs circuits, it's really that we use inkjet printers the same way we use at home to print documents, but now instead of documents, we are printing devices, circuits, and the materials that we use are really going to be used only where you need it, so there's no waste of material. And that's why people think that this technology has a huge impact in terms of cost and bringing new devices with new designs closer to people.
So, I'd actually like to get a conversation going amongst the four of you and get out of the way. So, by the way, I want to plug Carl's talk a little bit more. I have to say, listening to Carl, I thought, boy, it's like a philosophy talk. He was like, there's a Greek philosopher called Anaxagoras who said, does the mind exist to control the body? does the mind, does the mind exist only because the body is doing certain motor tasks? And suddenly he brought this up. But there was a remarkable amount of synergy between your talk and Bernard's talk in that you both said the design process was about really understanding what people's aspirations are and what people want to do, and then providing them, fancy technologies, not so fancy technologies, appropriate technologies, inexpensive technology, whatever, and then the design tools that are required to do this. And you both, I think, made this point really forcefully, by the way, to an educator like me, saying, hey, loosen up on your technology and teach people that, it's the service that's important. So having said that, can we really teach this design in an academic environment?
I think you can. I think there's a big movement going on, just like Dale's seen with the maker movement. I think there's a whole strand of education that's changing with more experiential, more hands-on learning. You've certainly seen some of the work at places like Olin College. Mm-hmm. You can certainly see it being done in secondary schools. I was amazed. I was in London for something. Someone said, you got to come see this school. And so I said, okay. And we drive out, and it's I guess in London they call a private school a public school and a public school a private. So it is two cultures separated by a common language. I'm like, so I go to this school, and what was interesting to me, it was what I would think of as a middle school. It was a public school. One guy who's the teacher, he's showing his kids are in the school. And they say, where do you guys live? And they point to the house, a block away. It's a community school. Mm. And the place was filled with this maker ethos. Mm. And it was an education that they were tying together the things they were learning. And so they would learn about something. They would go make something about it. They had 3D printers. They had laser cutters. And it was this integrated education. And I think the most powerful thing is this idea that people really want to make. They want to create something. I'll tell you. I'll try to keep it short, but I'll tell you a story without getting myself in too much trouble because this is webcast. Otherwise, I'd be happy to share the story.
It's from Berkeley, so don't fear
exactly.
Too much, right?
Yeah. So I was at this conference. Chris Anderson, the former Wired editor, asked me to go do this thing, and we were speaking about makers, and we were in New York. And right before, we're sitting in the green room, and Chris is talking to Bill Gates, and he's trying to tell him how important the maker movement is and what this really means. And I'm just listening over there, and I'm just sitting there, and he's getting nowhere. He's hitting his head against the wall, and nothing's getting through to. And Bill's like, this is kind of uninteresting, and Bill's about to go on stage, and he's going to tell about how he's spending his money to cure malaria. So it's kind of like, I'm going to solve the world's problems. Stop telling me about this. And so then Chris says, Carl, come over. And I'm like, oh, this is a great mission. And so I go over and I use this thing. This is a little bit, most disruptive technologies start out and they look unimpressive. And so I said, this is like the homebrew computer club. Something I thought Bill would really, it looks like a toy. It's not real. People are made, but there's real activity around this and people are doing the wildest things that you can't possibly. Kind of gets nowhere. Okay, Bill tells the world about what he's doing about malaria. Chris and I go up there and talk about the maker movement. And it was interesting because this will show what a numbnut I am. This is one of the talks where, because it was in New York, which is where I'm from, my mom and my sister for one time came and saw me talk. They had never seen me speak publicly. So we get off the stage, and this woman taps me on the shoulder, and she says, I've got to say to you, I was in the green room and I was listening, and Bill was completely wrong. She said, my entire career has been made about this thing of individuals have a desire to make things. And it doesn't really matter what they're doing. And so whether it's baking a cake or building a dollhouse or making a tree house or 3D printing stuff, it's this human urge to make stuff.
It's so striking, though.
Hold on, I got to give you a punchline. Just a punchline. Okay, so I look at this woman and I go, okay. And my mom and my sister are waiting to go to lunch, and this woman says, my entire career has been made out of this, and she shakes my hand and she walks off. I don't know who it is. Turns out it was Martha Stewart.
Oh.
So the lame
Very
part,
good,
exactly. And Martha really got the sense of what this is about. I think much more so than Bill.
But it's sort of striking to me that Bill didn't get it because, you know, a major part of the malaria cure is artemisinin, and the big story about low-cost production of artemisinin is synthetic biology, Absolutely. Which you were plugging as one of the sort of design tools for. So anyhow, it's, to me, I think this artemisinin story and the malaria story is an exemplar of the maker movement on.
Absolutely.
You know, Bernard, I'm going to ask you. You know, Time Magazine, I'll tell it for the audience. You know, has its list of 50 top or some such number of top technologies. And last week they had, this toolkit for 10 different, a toolkit of 10 different devices. They call it, I guess, the ecology, open source ecology movement. You know, these, including some 3D printers and some other things, for what it would take to bring a set of 10 tools, a young Polish entrepreneur, a set of 10 tools that you could put together to do clean water sanitation, not to teach people how to wash hands. That, I think, is too hard. But, but I looked at that. That, to me, was really maker movement meets development engineering. Have you seen this? And what do you, from looking at you, maybe you haven't.
Well, again, I like technology, but I don't want to be stuck in technology, right? And as I mentioned in my presentation, my emphasis is human development and sustainable development. Technology is one way toward that goal. But the kind of technology that you are talking about, I came across something called a multifunction platform. Where
Actually, the head of UNDP, Helen Clark, was here last week, and she said she went to Burkina Faso, and someone told her the multi-platform.
The multi-platform, which can be used essentially, is kind of an energy type of platform that can be used for multiple purposes, whether it is to get electricity or it is to crush the corn or what have you there. So no, that's an area that it's wide open in terms of research. But in terms of technology, I think it's a wide open field right now, and there are so many opportunities. It's even hard to grasp essentially where we want to go with it. But to me, I mean, a test of technology for the developing world is, obviously good technology that works, right? There's no doubt about it. But it's about affordability, accessibility, availability, and sustainability. And if we cannot pass those four, essentially, levels there, then I don't necessarily want that technology, at least yet, until it can essentially come up with, it can pass those four tests. Because it's easy to do harm with the wrong kind of technology. I mean, energy is good, but there are many instances where energy, especially big oil companies that have disturbed the environment in Africa and South America, where energy has done more harm to local populations than any good. So you've got to think that technology is always doing good. You have to be really careful about. This pen can write some beautiful poems, but that can also hurt somebody. So I think it's what you do with the technology that is critical. So you've got to be careful about, especially addressing the needs of people who don't want to fall back into they are climbing the poverty ladder, and you give them a technology and then they fall back from that energy ladder. That's non-ethical.
Yeah. But Bernard, one thing in your talk, I don't fear for American business really recognizing the market potential of the developing world, because I've seen so many examples of people doing socially responsible businesses, and after a few months saying, we don't want to be recognized as socially responsible, we just want to be recognized as a business. Don't treat us as having return rates which are any lower than anybody else. And you hear this story over and over again. You hear it in Africa, you hear it in China, you hear it in India. So, you know, I think that we are at a good stage, and as you correctly pointed out, I think I have not seen a more idealistic student body in 30 years. You know, I think you're tapping into that, and so I'm going to ask a few questions along that because we take these things as really our blueprint. So I'm going to ask you first, Dale. So how can what does this make a movement mean for education? And you talked about Olin College. There's that's okay. That's my business cards there. And there's other schools. Singapore University of Design and Technology, which are beginning to do this. But both Carl and Bernard, I think, made this point about striking a balance between hacking and actually thinking about the principles. So I mean, I'm sure you have this also in mind. But when I say, I'd love to say, as Dean, we brought the maker movement into academia. What would that mean? Or what should it mean?
Well, I mean, there's a couple ways of addressing this, but, I think sometimes I feel like academia is defeating the human nature of the students who come in that want to do stuff, right? And you say, no, don't do that. It's not time for that. You get to do that later. Instead of saying, do it now. Create, make things. And you'll learn by doing that. And kind of putting that forward instead of delaying it. I mean, I was talking to just a high school. So they actually changed because of their market, but they had a robotics program. Kids didn't get to make robots until the third year. They learned about a school that they got to, make it in freshman year, and they were getting more of those students because kids wanted to do stuff. And I think there's a lot of ways
I agree. A caricature. I'm going to sort of say what you said a little more starkly to this audience. High school students come in here full of beans, wanting to make things, and we beat them into submission with 3D prerequisite charts.
Right.
And there's something really wrong with this, right? I'm just going to say it a little more starkly than you. So tell us how we should fix this.
But I think part of it, we look at the things that we can kind of standardize easily, and that has put us in the sort of content side of education a little bit too heavily, I think. Content now is everywhere. It's not in a textbook. It's easily accessible. What you have to be is sort of motivated and have the context for understanding the value of that content wherever it is. I think the idea of process and experience is really where the focus, when we talk about design, could be that word. I don't think it's the only word in there, but you're going through a process of starting with probably bad ideas and refining them and trying them out and learning about how to make them real, how to test them and talk about them, how to put them out in front of other people independent of you. And whether it's problem solving or product creation, I would like to see a little bit more, where you're recognizing that process. And if it were art that you were teaching, you wouldn't just sit here and talk about art history. You would actually engage them in the processes of art, and you would have lots of people here who were different kinds of artists and had different strengths, and you would connect them together. And so I think it could be a much more lively place. I think some of the distinctions we have between applied and theoretical and mental and manual and all that stuff needs to be kind of parked somewhere else, and we need to just kind of dive into it. And have this, my fundamental belief, though, is what we ought to be teaching kids is to engage them in the process. And we're not really teaching them in that sense. I use a sport analogy of coaching. It's sort of like they get to play the game. You're on the sideline, and you have ideas about how they might get better at it. But if you start lining up in formation, that's a problem. And I think that's a lot of what parents do and schools do is to take control away from kids over what that basic process is and experience is.
Yeah, there's just one thing I want to say. There's an interesting essay, if you haven't read it, it's called Lockhart's Lament. Yeah. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's an interesting one. It's the musings of a math teacher and how we teach math poorly. And it's the same thing about art and music. You get to imagine. I mean, in the analogy is math. You go through stage after stage, and you never really solve the problem same thing in engineering. And he says, imagine if in music for the first 2 years you just got to play scales. And in the third year you got to, and eventually by, you're now 18 years old. It's the first time you get to play a song. And I think a lot of teaching has that aspect to it of it's just skill building, skill building, skill building, as opposed to, the T-shape that you were talking about where you go breadth, where you understand the full problem and you get to work through problem after problem after problem.
So, since we've already done Anaxagoras, we are currently sort of Socratic style, where we want people, you coach them, you teach them, rather than mentor them. Mentoring would be a more, is it time that we really sort of change? In light of what you said, Dale, and what you're saying, Carl, we don't have this model of, teacher fulminating from the pulpit, but really a more inclusive process. Is it as profound as that?
Well, I tell you, one other thing that really bugs me in this is we have this priority in the nation around STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math, and I don't know if you even know what it is, but do you want more STEM is I kind of say the push model of education, whereas make is, do you want to make is a pretty interesting thing. But, we tell kids and we set up these barriers that it's going to be really hard if you want to be an engineer, right? Mm-hmm. And it's going to be really hard to get into school unless you're a really, really smart student. Now, so that's maybe true of what we might call an elite engineer or a small percentage of them. But I believe, like the icebergs, there are engineers in the population that are never coming here and that are never really those smart students that have tremendous amount to offer. And I think and to some degree, I'd like to see the engineering profession shake itself up a bit and say, in the way that sort of, I think, design has been used as a word to shake it up a little bit, but there's more to just having all these educational credentials. It is how you think and how you work with other people and what you're able to do. And, some of what we see is that people are able to use technology in their own ways to gain control and solve problems. And that's really powerful. That's kind of where I come. When you see the disaster like in Fukushima, that people say we don't have enough Geiger counters, let's get hackers to build them, and then we'll get those Geiger counters out in the community, we'll log the data, and we'll start sharing it because we have better data than the government does. And we're being truthful in just putting the data out there where the government is holding it back. So when I see those kind of social impact of technology and kind of grassroots and bottom up, I think we want to support that. And not act like we need an educational system that sort of approves or disapproves. They're just part of it. I mean, I think even like when I think of Maker Faire, it isn't that it's just amateurs there. I mean, anybody could be there. And we all mix it up in good ways. And that's, I think education in some ways should not be about making elite engineers. It should be about these competencies that we think are important for all citizens to have, just as reading and writing are, but problem solving and creativity. These are things we don't want kids to say, oh, I'm not good at math, therefore I'm not going to do this. We want them to see all of this as valuable.
One of the things I think would be interesting is, it would be interesting if an engineer from your program actually had a portfolio.
Exactly.
It's kind of interesting that what they have is they have a resume, they have credentials, and so you tell me I took, ME 484 and, it was really hard. You should have seen the final. As opposed to,
here's my portfolio.
But here are the projects I worked on. Here's the problem.
That's what's happening already. In some ways, the kids are putting their work on YouTube. They don't really have the formal mechanisms of curating it, but they're saying, here's what I did. Here's the robot I built. And they make social connections. They get summer jobs because people begin to know them. And in some ways, the world of work is happening that way faster than the world, I think, of academia. But it's sort of like, when will admissions officers say, I will look at a portfolio as opposed to, or in addition to test scores, I will actually look at a body of student work if you put in this URL. You think about it, that work was not accessible to previous generations. Today it is.
I think if you look at this word disruption that's come up a bunch of times, and you see all the things that higher education is going to be the next industry that's disrupted.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
What happens to industries that gets disrupted? It's because some part of it's gotten commoditized.
Yeah.
There's something where, you know, it's over-serving or underserving. And if you look at it and you go, higher education is going to happen. So you say to yourself, what is going to distinguish? And it doesn't really matter whether it's Cal or it's, you know, Purdue or Virginia Tech. What are the things that have been commoditized in these institutions, and what could be special going forward? So I say, sitting in a classroom with 400 students taking introductory calculus, that has been made a commodity by academia.
Yeah.
They've already proved. And so would I rather sit, or your students are kind of starting to vote with their feet, would I rather sit in an auditorium and do that, or go online and I can see the best calculus instructor do it? What is special about being one of 400? So I think as you think about education moving forward, what are the things that are going to be unique and different? And one of the things is the things that you can do together and the interaction between the people who are here, as opposed to the things that, you know, the everything is going to be as good as.
Well said. Well said. So I fully agree. Let me drill down a little bit on this design culture. You know, I think this electronic portfolio, which you said on YouTube, and YouTube is the electronic portfolio. You know, I think architecture schools of architecture have traditionally had this culture in them. And they've had a studio culture to them.
Yes.
Which, so the question to you is, are we as engineers too thin-skinned to survive a studio experience? I think a studio experience can be brutal. Those of you that have probably listened to, and you know, you talked about customers, you know, telling you what counts and what doesn't. So, I mean, why is it that we have not internalized this studio culture, this kind of brutal evaluation that goes around with these? Is that something as time has just come, or is that sociological reasons?
The things as you say, it's like a sitcom I'm imagining in my mind. You know, the personalities of engineers actually doing critiques of each other, and their reactions just strike me as it could be pretty funny. But I mean, more seriously, I think the whole thing has grown up on this thing of just skill building. It's, you know, and it's unfortunate that it hasn't had as a matter of fact, I remember when I was in college, I used to go by the engineering quad, and it used to have all these things where you could build stuff. And over the years, the classroom squeezed it, you know, first the computer labs, and then everything squeezed out the things about actually doing physical stuff. I think it'd be incredibly interesting for people to return to that, and I think some of the universities you mentioned and some of the other programs are exactly that. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a bunch of the students. I was going to call them kids. That's not right. The students, the students in Engineering Without Borders, and they said one of the things they like so much is hands-on work. And I think that's a direct contrast to, you know, what school is. As a matter of fact, I had this debate recently with the head of the principal for my kids' school, who, I live in the neighborhood, and so she wanted kids to come to Cal and get opportunities working in people's labs. And she was thinking about biology, and I said, you know what? That sounds so old-fashioned to me. You know, washing test tubes is a thing of the past. I don't want my kid. You know, you're supposed to come, you spend your summer, you wash test tubes. The Nobel laureate never even, you know, learns your name, and you're supposed to, by osmosis, somehow figure out, I'm in love with science. You know, and instead, on the other hand, you go to something like iGEM. You know, this is this genetically engineered
We should tell people
contest.
about iGEM.
iGEM is this contest that goes on at MIT, I think, every year, and it's internationally engineered.
It's for engineering cells or
bacteria, cells, and people are doing the coolest projects. And what's interesting about it is that it's kids, 17, you know, it's high school and college kids who are re-engineering bacteria. They're building things out of DNA. I mean, you see pictures of what they do. They don't have workshops. They have wet labs in their bedroom closet. And so that, to me, is the contrast between one way of learning. You know, do I want my kid? I'm not sure I want my kid with a wet lab, but I'm sure he would have way more fun. I mean, if you think back to, I mean, it was chemistry sets and erector sets. I mean, that's where we actually learned and got excited and got passionate about doing stuff. It's not by washing someone else's test tubes.
Yeah. But
I think we need to go back to what the university was about. 100,000 years ago, about 900 years ago, the great universities of Europe, Oxford and La Sorbonne in Paris, were for young people to find their place in the universe. That's what the term university is about. And today, unfortunately, I think universities are not are not fulfilling
it's
that.
This sort of skill building
that mission is about, essentially 4 years of boot camp, and then you survive essentially 4 years. Look at the curriculum. It's a bunch of little boxes, right? I mean, you mark them. The classrooms, it's all linear. The classrooms are linear. In fact, you have a teacher and you have a bunch of people who are supposed to suck it up as best as possible for 1 hour and survive it, which is an old tradition that in the old days only a few people could read books. So the teacher could read the books and the students could not read the books. So obviously the teacher knew everything about it. Well, that's 900 years old type of mindset there. I mean, it's about time that we wake up. What I see with EWB generation, I call EWB generation, is young people who want meaningful engineering education. These are our clients. They want to go back to a university where they find their place in the universe. And that includes technology, that includes engineering, and that includes other disciplines as well. Now, we always talk about STEM. Now, STEM is a new fad in town. My God, I don't want STEM. I want STEAM. S-T-A-M. We don't need more nerdy science, technology, engineers on this planet. A stands for arts. What about the arts there? STEAM. I think STEAM is more stronger than STEM. What about creating holistic engineers, global engineers who can use the right brain and the left brain? When you do design, should it be a left brain type of exercise? To me, it's a whole brain type of exercise. So I think it's STEAM instead of STEM, right?
Yeah,
our students want it.
Yeah, I really agree. You know, what you're saying, both of you were saying was, it can't just be left brain. It's got to be left brain.
No, we don't want that. I mean, 200 years of left brain has done some great things, but also left some wasteland behind it. And
Ana Claudia, we have not given you... Tell us, you both come from Brazil, and you do this super-duper fancy printed electronics. Tell us a little bit. And you've got a lot of undergraduates, I hear, in your labs.
That's right.
So maybe you brought experiential learning, and Brazil, I think, is on its way out of the developing world. If anything, it's exploding, it's rocketing into prosperity. But can you tell us what your aspirations are with what you're doing in your lab for?
Sure. I think I entered this area for changing the way things were and providing more energy and all that. So I really think that the future of this technology is that because now you have a new set of materials, and the fact that you can make electronics conformal, stretchable, which is something that is very helpful when you want to integrate electronics with humans, and not in the sense of changing the way humans operate, but really making our lives more efficient. So I have projects where we look at new ways of creating Band-Aids, where those Band-Aids now have some electronics so that it can tell us if our blood oxygenation is right, or if there is a local high temperature. That can also be used for, there's a new project that we are working on, how to monitor how wounds are being healed with this type of electronics. I have students that work on solar cells, and I have students that want to continue that. And the nice thing about it is that they are completely different stage where I was when I was doing my PhD. They are already thinking this technology will only make an impact if I can add the circuits, if I can add the battery, and if we really can print the whole thing. So we send a big roll of plastic now that is the battery, is the electronics in the solar cell all together there, and it cannot break, and it can function just as well as the conventional technology does. And we also...
So can you light up Africa? I think this lighting Africa, I have to say I agree with Bernard. That's a grand challenge for localized solutions.
Yes, yes. I mean, one of my colleagues who works in this area too, one of the criticism that we get is like, oh, the materials are not mature enough. They don't last for 20 years. But they do last for 5. And when you go, he went to Nepal, and some people were using this technology, and they were saying, oh, it's the cost of installation is too expensive. And he said, well, there's no installation. People take the solar cell out of their houses in the morning, they put in the front yards, and then at night they bring it in. There's no cost of installation. So there are these things that people just don't, they're not there, they don't know how people will use that technology, therefore sometimes the technology is an overkill.
Yeah. Let's get some, I'd like to make sure we open it up because, you know, there's questions from the audience, and let's see, Karen has got a microphone, and Craig does too. So I'd like to request that you identify yourself, and please use the microphone. People will get you microphones.
All right.
And let's make sure we get some student volunteers to ask questions too here.
Thank you. I'm Rashmi from Lawrence Hall of Science. For those of you who don't know that, it's the Public Science Center for UC Berkeley. So I have 2 questions kind of leading to the discussion you have been having. And before that, I want to mention one thing. My sister-in-law yesterday was asking my 5-year-old son, who's in kindergarten, hey, why do the leaves turn red in fall? And he thinks for a minute, and then he says, I don't know. And she's like, maybe that is something you should need to ask your teacher tomorrow. Instantaneous response, no wait. He says, or maybe Google? So related to that, considering the fact that today's children are spending more time online, both socially and educationally, how do you synergize that with the fact that engineering, design, and innovation needs to be more interactive, more hands-on, something that people really need to spend time together working with their hands? Secondly, related to that question, specifically to Dale, human beings are social, right? And that is one of the, I would say that is part of the reason for the success of the Make movement. Other than the fact that people can put up their projects on YouTube, how does the Make movement work with a world that people are spending virtually rather than physically?
Sure. So I like to think of a world, say, 50 years ago, that you were kind of defined by your neighborhood or your school, the people you knew. If you're, you know, the dad who had a shop kind of thing in the garage, well, you picked that up because dad had that. And I think, you know, what we now have access to is expertise that is distributed. You know, you might have an interest in something, and you can find someone in another town, you know, who can talk to you about that, or share an Instructable, or share photos about what they're doing. I think that's a pretty big thing. It's sort of the world of hobbies, again, in a way, but you can find other people doing that stuff very easily. And I think that once you get an interest and you step out and say, that's my interest, you begin meeting lots of other people that share that interest. And it may be you come to a maker fair and that's where you find people. It may be a club. The thing that's parallel Maker Fair, I think, is this idea of maker spaces where people begin getting together and working together. It's kind of the stuff you could imagine doing online, you know, in an open source community, but because you want to share tools and space and find others easily, it's kind of gotten started here. And Tech Shop is a mature example of that. There are a lot of different models. I'm working on how do we get these into sort of K-12 environments. Having a physical space where the work persists, where the tools are available, the materials are there, and there's some knowledge about how that all works. You might have called it shop class 50 years ago, but it's kind of reinvigorated with an art studio and a computer lab and new tools and really fresh ideas. That this isn't a trade school track. This is perhaps advanced engineering track as well. So I think that the social part that you mentioned, though, I think is, you know, some people online create videos, and some people create blogs, and other people are creating things and using those things to build communities as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally shocked by the willingness of people to share information. And
It really
it's
is.
actually, it's unbelievable that they're willing to share their expertise. It's not quite clear what the currency is. For example, Dale mentioned, we have a website called Instructables. We have 12 million people a month that go to Instructables.
Wow.
This is, you know, and it's interesting, and I've published a couple in Instructables, and despite my like daily workload of hundreds of emails, if someone sends me an Instructable email, I answer that one first. And I think it says something about people. I think when you find other people who care a lot about the thing you care about, you engage deeply. Right. And so even though people are online, Instructables are all about making things in the physical world. And so it's really interesting. And it's, you know, it's something about that reputational capital. It's about finding someone else. I mean, I grew up in a world where I thought all the knowledge was contained in the card catalog with the Dewey Decimal System. You know, if there wasn't a book on the subject, there wasn't something. And now I find out I get interested in something like flexible electronics. And immediately I can find someone, and I can probably in a short, you know, in an hour, be having a conversation, certainly an email conversation with someone who's an expert in that. That's not the world, you know, we grew up in.
I just, one last thought in there is just, I think what they are doing is creating meaning. All right? It isn't just like creating information. They are talking about they've had a meaningful experience and they want to share that. And that's what we see played out. I mean, I think Engineers Without Borders and other places, that this wasn't just something I did. It had these other meanings. And I need to talk. I need to share. I need to share with other people what they are.
I'm Daniel Cohen in bioengineering, a PhD student, hopefully not too much longer. So just building on the Geiger counter example and just with the democratization of tools, CAD, et cetera, is there a way to standardize grand challenges and maybe crowdsource with all these makers different components? So if you took a solar-powered lantern for the developing world or medical device components that didn't have to be sterile, could you have a core of people who produce part A and then a core who assemble part B, like the LED column and so on, and then someone puts that together and sends that off? But just a way of getting these designs that are amenable to that out there and having more people involved with that? Or is that something that's being set up right now?
No, I don't. No, I cannot answer that.
I mean, the one thing I would say is I think when you look at developing emerging economies, I think there's a huge spectrum, first of all. I think, you know, we talk about Brazil, when you talk about China, you know, people talk about BRICS, you know, Brazil, Russia, India, you know, China. You look at that, and then you look at parts of sub-Saharan Africa, and they really are very different, or places in Central America. So one of the things is, I think a lot of us are oriented to the kinds of things where they already benefit from having mobile devices, having connectivity. I think the ability, you know, one of the limits of our reach is with those tools. If we can get there, you've heard the stories of farmers, you know, getting information about their crops by having mobile phones. You've heard about micropayment systems. I think we're able, with a lot of technology, to reach that part of the world that has its, well, maybe its toe in the world of technology. When you get to the village that doesn't have water, doesn't have sanitation, I think you're really in a very different place. And so if you're in that part where it is somewhat connected, I think there's huge amounts of stuff that are being done. One of the things that I marvel at is we have lots of stuff we give away for free and lots of software, you know, lots of the things I showed you. What is most amazing to me is that the demographic of the people who use it is almost the inverse of our professional customers. So when you know, so almost always China, India, Russia, Brazil are the ones that pop to the top of the list. And they often do so by an order of magnitude more. So there's this hunger for information, there's a willingness to go get it, much more so than you'd see like in the United States or Western Europe. But I would qualify it. It is people who are already emerging in some way, already have access to some amount of technology.
And there are 6 billion cellular phone subscriptions in the world for a population of 7 billion. That just came out a few months ago. And by the way, there are only 3 billion toothbrushes in the world. So,
Can I just say one thing on the, you know, I'm a little suspicious of the grand challenges, to be honest, as motivational frameworks.
I was going to hope someone would weigh in on grand challenges.
You know, what I think has made the maker movement kind of interesting to me, and somebody says, I'm not trying to organize it or drive it. It is happening in much way the sense of open source has happened, to use Eric Raymond's phrase, to scratch your own itch. I mean, do something that you have your own personal goals to do, and we're not trying to say those certain goals are, better than others. I do hope that people engage in social change and other things as it, but often it starts that they want to figure out how to make lights blink, and that fascinates them, and they get into new challenges from there. Well, but to your specific thing about standardization, I wish particularly grad students would do a better job of documenting what they've done in a non-academic way. Okay, so if I'm a publisher, information guy, so what I think we've tried to do in Make, and what I think in the sense O'Reilly is make this stuff accessible to more people. That when a couple of years ago I was going to the MIT Media Lab, and this guy had this one a self-powered switch, like a big pen, to transmit a signal or something, and it wasn't getting funded, it wasn't getting, it didn't pass the usual hurdles. But I kept thinking, if that was a recipe out in an Instructables, someone else will find that and need it and be able to apply it and use it. And so contributing to the sort of greater social good can be just writing up what you do and making sure it's in a place where other people can find it. Without necessarily needing to standardize or agree with anybody else. It's just that kind of serendipity is what creates new things.
Go ahead. Dave.
Parker Smiley from a retired mechanical engineer. I'd like to know if schools with not much money, is it feasible for them to have a 3D printer? Their kids can learn to use that and create just about anything on it?
Well, I think it's a fair question. 3D printers are lowering in price. You can probably find $600-700 models, but most are $1,200 to $2,000. But 5 years ago they were $20,000. Now I don't know if even these models at this level can take the banging of a classroom of kids on them. But the idea of the 3D printer seems to be transformative to kids that come across it. So I don't know that they actually need a whole lot of time with it. So you could do the demonstration and then go on. Making can be done with cardboard, making can be done with scissors, making can be done with anything that you can afford to put together. We're makers, right? Like we don't necessarily need the high tech to be able to do this. High tech is an interesting entry point for a lot of people here, in particular getting the attention of kids sometimes. But I think I would like to encourage schools to start where they can, creating space and creating time and creating opportunity. Those are the three hardest things. Even if we have the technology, to get those three things in place is really difficult.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I'm really sort of pleasantly surprised at how fast the cross curve on these 3D. This bioprinter which you had, Carl, I think those are 6,000, 6,500. Yeah. And so I think, but the reason that they print, I think they're an intermediate point though between the conceptual design and the manufacture. You may not manufacture in bulk, but they're pretty, they're halfway there, and they may be all the way there.
And if it gets you into, using some of the design tools for 3D, I think that's the harder part in certain ways. Yes, you can find something online and print it out, but to be able to design and create and think about what's possible using these new tools there's almost no barrier to doing that.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things just about 3D printing specifically, but digital fabrication generally, is in some ways it's the inversion of the fundamental law of the Industrial Revolution. Right? Mm-hmm. Industrial Revolution comes along, and we can make things at high quality and low price by making gazillions of them.
Right.
All of a sudden, for the first time, you can make things that are really high quality at reasonable price and going down at quantities of one. That to me is kind of the amazing thing, is that it used to be, had to make molds of this thing, or we, had to generate up tooling to do something. Nowadays you can come along, and that's why you're seeing, what you're seeing right now in the world of commercializing of this kind of technology tend to be high value, low volume applications. So medical devices, so prosthetic legs that have to fit you, hearing aids that have to go, jewelry that's, appeals to you personally. Those are the things but I think it's a very short time, and I was joking at the break, 3D printing, is an overnight success that took 20 years. The first 3D printer I saw was 25 years ago, but right now the pace, the acceleration that it's on is amazing, in terms of material speed, everything else. And I think it's going to make its way into more mainstream applications.
Yeah. Let's see. Who has the microphone? Okay. Go.
Lots of questions.
Hi, my name is Harshal. I'm actually the project manager at the current EWB chapter. And before I ask my question, I'd like to personally thank Mr. Bass for mentioning Lockhart's Lament as a fellow mathematician. My question mainly pertains to intellectual property and some of the original hardships that entrepreneurs have to go through. There are a lot of software that's free and easy to use, but the minute anyone tries to commercialize anything or monetize on a design that they've already prototyped, 5-digit figures start to appear, and they're major barriers that are to be overcome. Do you have any advice, and what are your opinions on those barriers?
Yeah, one of the interesting things, we made a decision over the last couple of years to make sure all of our software was free to students, and that's from, grade school all the way through graduate school. One of the biggest problems we ran into, or everyone's very thankful for that, and right now we get 12,000 new students a day, new students coming to download the software. So it's a huge success, and it is reaching parts of the world. Like I said, it's reaching China and India and Brazil. One of the things we noticed was exactly that problem. So one of the complaints with every good thing you do, someone says, but I can't get to that next step. And so we actually took the step of giving students beyond the university access to software. And then we specifically did something for people who wanted to do entrepreneurial stuff. So as an example, we started this thing called the Clean Tech Partner Program, in which anybody who starts a company in clean technology they can apply for a grant of up to $150,000 worth of software that we give to them for free. And we've done this in a number of areas, different areas like clean tech, and we've done it across the world. Because I think that transition is really hard. You're in school, you have access to great facilities and the great minds and all the tools that you need, and then the next thing you're at the top of the bar, holding out your hat looking for money. And so we've done that. I think the issue from industry and using software is not the IP issue. I think different universities have taken very different approaches to how they commercialize technology. It's probably a better question for the dean, but we've certainly seen universities that are really encouraging of the commercialization of research, which in some ways I find it astonishing that particularly public universities where we are paying for it, that somehow there's a licensing to go create something to make the world a better place. It seems kind of backwards, but different universities have different points of view on this.
We got an enlightened policy, but I don't want to spend time. We really do. This is after all Berkeley, so
there are others less enlightened than you.
Let's see. Let's get one more or two more. Can we do two more? Okay, one.
My name's Terry. I work for Kaiser Hospital, and for years there's been an organization called Doctors Without Borders, and I've been hearing this terminology, Engineers Without Borders. Have the two organizations collaborated? They have a lot of similar goals.
Good question. When I started Engineers Without Borders in the United States, a few weeks after we filed as a 501c3, I got a phone call from a lawyer from Doctors Without Borders, and the only interaction we have had with Doctors Without Borders has been through their lawyers. They came, and that was the same year when they had the Nobel Peace Prize. Nothing wrong about Doctors Without Borders, don't get me wrong, they're doing a fantastic work. But if it's Without Borders in your title, they go after you. And we had to come up to an agreement. They went after Lawyers Without Borders first. And after a settlement of $20,000, they came up with an agreement. And we have an agreement. We cannot take doctors with us on our projects.
There seems to be a lot of questions, but I tell you,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Andre. I'm a third-year mechanical engineering student, and this is a question for Bernard as well. If someone came to Berkeley and said, I have a great idea to improve society, that would be met with a lot of criticism and lashback, maybe because we want to keep the culture we have or because we're resistant to change for various other reasons. How do we have the power to just go to Africa or a developing community and say, I want to make a change and have it work?
Well, that's a heck of a question. We were talking about roadblocks. I think that the students right now are excited about changing the world. There's no doubt about it. Someone who is 20 years old today, they want to change the world. They want engagement. It's not the same crowd as, say, 10 years ago. Keep in mind, someone who is 20 years old today has heard of war in Afghanistan and Iraq for 10 years, half of their lives, has heard of climate change, has heard of big stuff, and have all sorts of tools that were not in existence 20 years ago. No wonder they want to change the world, right? So, and the question is, how do you change the world? Well, universities, with some exceptions, are not the best places to do that, to be frank with you. The private sector, yes. Universities are still lagging behind because they are stuck in the old mindset. Remember the three monkeys there? Don't talk change, don't speak change, don't hear change. I see that in many universities still in the United States. There are some exceptions. I mean, I think the programs here at Berkeley, some program at MIT, there are some schools that are getting it, but there are many schools that don't get it, that are still stuck in the old paradigm. So you want to change the world, go to the Peace Corps for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. Change the world, and then maybe decide on going back for a degree. You don't have to be an engineer to do engineering in the developing world. I thought about it. You don't have to have an engineering degree to fix all the pumps in the world. You want to be millionaire overnight? There are millions and millions of pumps that are not water pumps that are not working in the world. Get a training in Texas for $400 on how to fix a Mark I, Mark II, and Mark III pump. Sell your services to UN, World Bank, USAID, and so on. You will be a billionaire overnight. When you are done with the pumps, and do it in a for-profit model. Non-profit models are useless, right? Do it from a for-profit model for the most of it, as long as you do it for doing well by doing good. When you are done finishing Pump Fixers International, create Solar Panel Fixers International. And then do exactly the same thing. Believe me, there are huge opportunities out there. You don't necessarily need to have a BS degree to do it. No, it helps, right? It helps to have a degree. But until university get it, there are many other ways of changing the world. Just by then sitting in 4 years of college, 4 years of boot camp, and you survive 4 years of boot camp. I think we can do better than that.
Well, thank you very much. There seems to be a ton more questions, but I think let's conclude the discussion here in the interest of our broadcasts and so on. So I'd like to thank our guests here for your thoughtful questions, and our speakers and panelists for their insights and ideas. A video of this morning's proceedings will be available soon on our conference website for viewing or download. We'll send you CDs with all of our panelists. I now invite you to continue the conversation over lunch. And the lunch is next door. There are several people from the college that will walk you over. It's a lovely building called the Hearst Memorial Mining Building. It's actually a Julia Morgan building. While you're there, there'll be a number of posters and technology showcase, both posters, projects, and demonstrations by our own students. Let me once again acknowledge the support of the Kaufman Foundation and thank them for their generosity. Thank you to the Berkeley Student Chapter of Engineers Without Borders. Some of them still here. They're waiting to take us to the... Okay. They've been instrumental in the success of today's conference. We look forward to seeing you here again. Thank you very much for joining us. And go Bears. Thank you.